Hi, this is Tim from Time to Sew with a short video, and this week we're going to be using this embossing powder. It's made by Wow and it's the Clear Gloss Ultra High. Rather than being a fine granule like most embossing powders, this is quite a coarse one and it has some unusual properties, so off we go. So here we go, it's my stamp and I'm putting it underneath my heat sheet layer. Now I'm doing that because what I want to do is to put a sticky rectangle with the Versamark onto the heat sheet. So I'm taking the stamp away from underneath and that's left me with a rectangle of Versamark on my heat sheet, larger than the image on the stamp, the size obviously of the back of the stamp. So I'm just pouring my powder on. Now because I'm using a Heat Buddy heat gun, which gets as hot as a normal heat gun but doesn't have a particularly focused jet of air, I can put all my powder on in one go and melt it as in a pile like that. If you were using one of the more ferocious stick heat guns, you'd have to just put one layer on so each grain was actually touching the Versamark and melt that, and then whilst that was still molten, pour on another layer so the next layer was stuck to the first. Otherwise the powder will just blow away before it has a chance to melt. The Heat Buddy though, the jet of air isn't as focused, so you can get away by doing it all in one. Now you'll notice as this powder is melting, rather than just going to a liquid and flowing all across the table just like a pancake, it's forming little beads. That's because of the surface tension. As you continue to heat, you notice that the beads are joining one to another and forming a blob. You will find though that it's quite common for there to be little islands where for some reason the melted powder doesn't want to flow. If you keep heating it, quite often they disappear, or if you're impatient like me, just grab a pokey tool and just ease the molten liquid into those areas that haven't covered. There we go. So I'm just going to apply the heat again. Now the next thing to do is to add some colour. This is Wow powder again, this is copper. There we go. And next one, really bright red. And more delicate purple. This is a great way of just experimenting and using up little bits of embossing powder that you've got kicking around in your craft room. It's a great technique just for playing. Just experiment and see what happens. Now you can see I've using my pokey tool and I'm dragging one colour into another. You end up with sort of a marbling effect. There we go. Do like that copper. So now I've got my colours right. I'm just going to ink up my stamp with Versamark. The Versamark just helps the stamp to release. And I'm just going to rest it into that molten lump. Leave it for a minute or two and I can just lift it away. Yeah, I think that's cool enough now. So I'm just going to peel it away from my heat sheet. There we go. Voila, the finished item. Now, we needn't stop there. If you prefer a softer edge to the piece, rather than this organic edge with all little bits and pieces, if you just run the heat gun around it, mind you don't burn your fingers, whoop, or drop it, you'll see that it will just melt back and give a more rounded edge. The other thing you can do is just heat the whole thing, just back and forth with the gun, and it's just a bit of guesswork, I must admit, for how long it needs to be heated, and then you can chop it with the scissors, get a nice straight edge. The problem with this material is that when it cools right down, it goes brittle. So unfortunately you can't use it for jewellery or something like this, which is a pity. What I'm doing now is just showing you how, if you produce something that you're not very happy with, just chop it up, put it all in a pile and run your heat gun over it again and start again. Obviously you can't take the colour out, but you can add more colour on the top. You can mix the colours, add additional colours, whatever you like. So as you can see, this is all now beginning to melt. The other thing that you can do with the embossing powder is when you get it to the stage to put your stamp in, so you've got just the coloured molten mass on your heat sheet, you can drop little things into it, seed beads, etc. Just don't want to put anything with too much texture where you're going to stamp, because obviously it will affect the crispness of the image. There we go. I'm just using the direction of the heat gun here to help the molten lump to travel in the direction that I want it to. I think I'm going to go for the pokey tool again. Here we go, just pull it into those areas where it doesn't want to cover. That's it. Got a little lump left on the end of my pokey tool, so just knock that off. And it's left a little hard lump amongst the material that's melted. So I'm just holding my gun on there till that melts in with the rest. Here it goes. You can see it just flattening out so that little bobble melts. And then I'm going to add a bit more colour. This is black with glitter mixed in as well. It's called Glitz, and it's a really nice, nice powder. When we finish this piece, I'm going to show you a card with it as well. So here it goes. It's just melting into the lump there. And I'm just going to plonk my stamp in the middle. Give it a moment or two to cool. And then just peel the heat sheet away from the back. There we go. And you can mount these with double-sided dots onto a card. What looks really good is if you can mount them in such a way as to get a bit of light in from behind. So then, before I finish up, just a few little bits, just playing with the embossing powder. So, I'm just inking up a tree stamp. I seem to always turn to this stamp when I'm doing demos, but here we go, because it's one of my favourites. And I'm just using the black glitz, that's that detailed black embossing powder mixed with the ultra fine glitter. This is the point at which you don't want to sneeze. So I'm just going to slide that surplus powder back in the tub and then put the heat gun on. This is quite fun to watch actually, because as the powder melts, the glitter floats to the surface and you can see it changing colour and texture and everything as it goes. Because you've got this mixture of glitter and powder, you tend to lose a bit of detail, but on a stamp like this it doesn't matter. The glitter certainly makes up for it. So the next one I'm doing here is a butterfly. I'm stamping the butterfly there. And this is a bit of an oddball one. This is Dayglow. It's a sort of slightly greeny tinged coloured powder, and it glows in the dark. So I'm just showing you how it goes on like a standard embossing powder. Unfortunately I couldn't find a way of photographing it in the dark so you could see it glowing. You just need to take my word for that. It's quite funny in the warehouse, we switch the lights off and you can see the little pots of powder glowing in the dark. Children find them great fun. There we go. And finally, this is Wow's Ultra Fine Powder. A lot of manufacturers will make a detail or a fine embossing powder, but this is particularly fine. It's almost like talcum powder. The stamp I'm using here is, as you can see, a stylized dandelion. So I'm putting that onto the block, inking it with my Versamark, and then I'm going to put the powder on in the normal way. I've started using this ultrafine powder for a lot of applications where I would have used ink in the past. To try and use white ink on black card, you just end up with grey. And to use embossing powder on text, you often end up with the O's, the inside of the O's sort of filling out, and the P's, and the text difficult to read. This very fine powder doesn't give you a lot of relief. It doesn't swell a great deal, but it retains a lot of detail. You'll also see that as the powder melts, it goes to an absolute bright white. This is the only way I've found of achieving a strong colour against a black card. Just running the heat gun around just to make sure everything's done and the whole thing is cured off properly. And there we go, look at that. All the detail you'd expect from ink, but in embossing powder, and that strong white contrasting against the black. Well, thank you for watching. As always, everything that I've used is available on our website, www.timetosew.com.